Lance, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure. I understand you're in Auckland, New Zealand. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Raj, and thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, we are in Auckland, New Zealand, and we're way down the bottom of the world. But I have to say at the moment, we're very thankful that we are way down here.
I can understand. It's strange times, isn't it? Very, very strange times for all of us. So,
Yes. So with our we had a lockdown for 4 weeks. The whole country just stopped. Everyone went home. The
mhm,
only services that stayed open were hospitals and shops. So everything stopped and everyone, the government here did very well. They said you can walk and talk. So as long as you had a 2 metre distance, you're allowed to get out and exercise and to socialise, right? So we didn't call it social distancing. We called it physical distancing. And that
okay,
enabled people to talk with each other. And of course, the two things that keep us well in life are exercise and talking. And so they did that. We've had no community transmission for over 100 days now. We still have
brilliant.
cases coming in, but they're flying in from the country, but our borders are stopped. And when you fly into New Zealand, you're put in an isolation facility for 2 weeks because that's the incubation period.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Have you still got a safety corridor between yourselves and Australia?
Yes, we have. All borders are shut, even to the Pacific Islands where there's been no
Right.
COVID whatsoever. And there's a lot of debate around that. So our economy is getting a little bit hit, although we still are doing exports. Um, the biggest thing, so probably I think it's around 40 to 50% of our economy is from tourism. And places like Queenstown, if you've never heard of Queenstown, look it up. It's the adventure
Yeah,
capital, we say, of the
of the
world, but
world. Yeah.
probably not, of New Zealand. Bungee jumping, all of that sort of stuff over canyons and things. It's just beautiful. Their economy. So I was down there last Saturday night doing an event for a community. We do free community events on just how to deal with uncertainty, deal with adversity, and just really to deal with self-talk and all those other things.
Excellent. Well, that's good that you're doing that, and it's good news that we're hearing from out of New Zealand. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Now let's talk about you a little bit because you run your own company there, Warn International. I understand Warn is an acronym. Tell us a little bit about you, your company, and what you guys do.
Yes, I was a builder till the age of 35, which is a kind of unusual being in the building industry. And I decided to join the police at the age of 35 and spent 22 years there. And I became the lead crisis negotiator for New Zealand Police. So I trained and qualified as an FBI negotiator, went to Australia and trained as a counter-terrorist negotiator. So lots of work around emotional people. Then I took promotion into the police emergency call centre, and was responsible for the entire country for recruitment and training of all staff in dealing with volatile situations and de-escalation techniques of emotional people. And you sort of know when it's time to leave a business, because I started to get into trouble because we were getting swamped 3 million calls a year into the call centres just in Auckland alone. And there's only 300 staff, right? Rotations 24/7, so there's not a lot of staff. So I kept pushing for
Yeah,
more staff and doing resilience programs for them, which were going very well. And so one day I decided to leave and started working in my very first opportunity was in a contact centre. That's where I started with a bank over here. Started doing it, and at the end of it was very well, how to de-escalate and how to engage, and what do you say to an angry person? Nothing until they've finished. All of those sorts of things based on contemporary neuroscience. So that we talk about the 5 different generations, et cetera, how to engage with each, but basically using humility and politeness rather than meeting anger with anger, rather than threatening somebody. If you don't stop doing that, I'll hang up. We just say, well, when's a good time to call you back? And people go, what do you mean? Well, it's just the way you're speaking, not with me or to
interesting.
me, just the way you're speaking. And it's
Yeah,
working, right? So we started doing that. And now it's morphed into most of my work today. I have to say, it's probably split 50% contact centres and 50% doing workshops in the building, farming, any areas where suicide is high. My specialty in the police was suicide intervention. And I've just finished a book which comes out in New Zealand here in about 3 weeks' time. And 5 chapters of that is on how to deal with suicidal people. What happens if people commit suicide? How do I recover? And what happens if I don't kill myself? So it's multifaceted. And yeah, so that's, I have to say, and post-COVID, people are fragile. It doesn't
yeah,
matter. I started off in a real estate company the other day, just doing a presentation. I said, How many of you people in this room are feeling more tired than ever before? Having weird dreams? Perhaps just feeling a little fragile, maybe a little bit vulnerable? No, 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 no. So that's our first go-to, isn't it? No, I'm good. They were following me out the door. So I have free documents I can send to people. We have a document on how to get to sleep within 3 to 5 breaths, how to stop waking in the early hours of the morning, all based on neuroscience and neuropsychology. And so we give that out as free. We've got a YouTube channel going now with free stuff on it. You'll see if you go there. I did some free posts. So I did live on Facebook. And I don't know why I did it live, to be honest, but they're just informal. You'll see me in an old shirt, a jersey, just sitting there talking away to the phone. But anything to help people through these crazy times. There's no new norm, is there? And no, so this is my job these days, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. I can tell you love it, and you've had a really interesting background, and I can see why you've kind of landed up where you are today. Congratulations, by the way, on the book, and also your business, because it's tough when you're in a career and you suddenly you venture out on your own. We've been there ourselves. We know what it's like, and it's tough. But you've got a lot of credibility. You've got a lot of knowledge, experience, and wisdom behind you. So you're doing all the right stuff, and that's brilliant. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you. You're embarrassing me now.
No, okay. Well, I'll stop then. So let's talk a little bit more about contact centers, okay? Because there is a lot of stress in contact centers anyway. Now, coupled with the fact that many contact centers, staff are being forced to work from home. They might be in environments that they're not comfortable, because sometimes it's an escape to go to work. So they're maybe facing new stresses, new uncertainties. We have a lot of leaders who are watching this, and they're probably thinking, how can I tell little Joey or Mary or Steve or Marianne that they're okay? What advice would you share?
Yeah, so people are safe at the moment, or when they're working from home, they feel safe. Now, we all went back to work, I think about 4 to 5 weeks ago, but only 1/3 of the population went back. So the contact center work that I do these days is all by Zoom, because people just didn't want to come back, so they felt safe. So in times of adversity and uncertainty, they go together. So if we have a death in the family, if we have a traumatic event, or if we have uncertainty, so the whole day we're reflecting on ourselves, and this is what's going on. So if I was to ask you, I asked people in the audience, anyone, what was the name of the first school you went to? And they'd tell us, and everyone else in the room was thinking of the name of their first school, just like the people who are watching this right now. We reflect on ourselves the whole day. Now, when we're doing that, we're comparing our past with our present. Worry's the future, right? So that's how we operate. But there's nothing to compare with. And so because of that, our brains are going a lot faster. And but with everyone, when we go through adversity, we want to withdraw. We don't want people around us, believe it or not. And so the first sign that something isn't right is, and it is for me, and I've never spoken to anyone who's ever not looked at me and they're unwell. So if they don't look at you, if they're not looking at the camera, if they're working from home, if you're in front of them and they're not staring you back in the face, not so much eye contact, that's different. So no one really does like to be stared at in the eye, because it's kind of weird. But we do like to look at the facial expressions. If they're not doing that, then they're not well. There's a noticeable change in their behavior. They will look unkempt. They will look untidy. They may even have worn the same shirt for 2 days. And so if you touch base with them, even if you work from home, we recommend that you go to work into the office at least once a week, just to start that off, because you really do have to get socialization, social contact. That's how we deal with things. Now, I'll ask this of people who are watching. When you talk with somebody on the phone, you imagine what they look like. And that's what we do, because we cannot. So I can see a photo of you, Raj, and I can see the video, etc. So I'm talking with you, right? So I can see you. And if that wasn't there, I'd be making it up in my head what you look like. And so that shows to people And I do this little exercise in contact centres where we'll be talking away to each other. And this is people who don't talk to people face to face. And they'll be telling them something about something they've done in their life, a holiday, right? So 80% of our memories are bad stuff, 20% is of good stuff. And the majority of that is holidays we've been on. So we get them to talk like that. And I say turn, and one person, the listener, will turn their head away and the person will stop talking automatically. So we're wired to talk with others. That's the first thing to disappear. And so if you notice that, what could you say? Well, as a crisis negotiator, I had one go-to, whether it's a hostage situation, a barricaded criminal, or a suicidal person. It was always the same thing. What's going on? What do you mean? Well, you're in a house with people and you're not letting them out. You've got a gun in there. You're drunk. You're not coming out. You're on a bridge. And so it just engages with people. And so that's what it is. Get the conversation going first. Now, it's done in 3 stages. The stage is what's going on right now. What's going on in your head? What are you thinking about? How did you get there? Has there been some things going on? Always go back to move forward. And then how can we help you? And the way to help people is to really meet with them in a neutral place for a cup of coffee. And they have to get out of their zone. People feel safe. We call it a bubble over here, the COVID bubble, right? So a lot of us panicked, right? So when uncertainty comes, the other thing is food, water, shelter, air. Do you remember Maslow? The model of the hierarchy of needs? Food, water, shelter, air, money, and family. So we surround ourselves with those things. The day before lockdown here, I went and filled the car up and my daughter said, are you going somewhere for the next 4 weeks? And I said, I don't care. I'm going to fill it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that's what we do, right? So we panic a little bit and then we don't want to move. We don't want to get out of our comfort zone. And that's what we really do have to do. And we have to get sleep and all that. So I invite people, if they do want that sleep tips document, it's there. It's available freely from our website.
So tell me, you've got the 3 stages there, and that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. And with your experience, it makes a lot of sense, everything you're suggesting. So let's take a scenario. A lot of contact centers are still in lockdown. They're in different parts of the world. It's getting worse, like the States and various other places, and they're going back into lockdown. How do you say you spot somebody, they're not doing too well, you're talking to them on Zoom or Skype, you see they're showing the body language signals that suggest there's something funny going on. You can't take them out for a cup of coffee because there's nowhere to go. What else can you do then to bring them into maybe a neutral type of environment? Is there anything you can do home, with what you're currently doing?
Great question. No one's ever asked that before. So what I do is the first thing is I'll make electronic contact. So I'll send them a text message or I'll send them an email and I'll just say, hey, I noticed in that session you had your head down. In fact, you had your camera off, right? So that's another thing we do. We have our camera off and we're doing the Zoom session. So if I'm doing a presentation, I'll have their camera off. And I'll just say, look, is everything okay? I've actually attached a document for you that you can have a look at, but I'd really like to catch up, but it's up to you. Please reach out. If you don't, I'm going to reach out to you in some other way. So please, so you've got to try and encourage them. Now, the thing about this, Raj, is our brains are wired to look after others. So if I was to ask you to think right now of one thing you're grateful for in your work life, other than the fact that you've got a job or in a great business, one thing you're grateful for in your personal life, and one thing you're grateful for about yourself, chances are for your work you would have said colleagues and or the people you help. For your personal life, you would have thought of your family or friends. For yourself, you had to stop. You had to stop and have a little think, I'm not sure. And so we're wired to look at, if I was to come in, if you were in front of me, I'd say, how are you going? Well, how's things doing, right? And you'd go, good. So I do, are you? I want you to do a double take to have a think, am I? I think I'm good. And so we're wired for that. Can I give you a hand with that? No, I'm good. I've got this. And so it's about breaking down a little and normalizing, right? So I don't like that term normalizing. We've got a big push over here. Suicide rates are one of the highest in the world. And we've got this big campaign, it's okay not to be okay. No, it's not okay not to be okay. But what it is, it's okay to say I'm not okay. And that's my message to everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that
we
makes
are
a
the
lot of sense.
same. We are the same. Look, if I was to ask, if and I do this too. So this is the difference between nature and nurture. So nature is all those things I've just talked about. And so when was the last time we bought ourselves a gift just for us? And it meant something. And so what I'm encouraging people to do, you're my hero. And I've done some work. The very first gig I had after our lockdown was with a government agency over here, and they had to work through, right? And they were dealing with claims, all sorts of things, government funding for businesses, etc. And they were smashed. They were working long hours, but they had the same issues that everybody else had, but they had to work. Hell, I could watch Netflix all day if I wanted to. I didn't, but I could, right? And so that's a double whammy. So I said to them, look, why don't you go and buy yourself a coffee mug? And that's your COVID mug. And every time you drink out of that mug, you go, I worked in COVID and I got through it, to reward ourselves. And that's what I encourage it. $2. That's what I encourage people to do, is to do something for themselves, just to say, you're good, you've got this. And things, will they go back to normal? No. It's never going to be the same again, because we're going to be doing more Zoom sessions. I'm sitting in New Zealand talking with you across the other side of the world. And I was over in the other side of Canada, all sorts of places last year. Hawaii, doing presentations everywhere. I'm missing that. But the way things are, this is the new norm. And so now we can still connect. And I'm doing work into Melbourne at the moment. I don't know if you heard about Melbourne in Australia, which is our neighbouring country, just devastated. So we're doing our first gig with them is, and we're doing it for free for them, for Doctors on Call, it's called. So I'm doing a free presentation for them just to say, hey, we've got some videos that we're going to send them, which they're going to kindly pay for. But I'm doing a free session just so they introduce myself and say, hey, this is what's going on. So talking about what's going on, talking about your feelings, talking about your emotions, is what we should be doing more of, to say you are not alone. Everyone is thinking. If I was to ask you, Roger, if a dog could talk, what word would it say? What one word would it say? Now, most people would think woof. I've never heard a dog say woof in my life. And if you're in Japan, it would be one. And around the world, it's a different word. It's what we got read to as stories when we were a young child. So fear is learned, mostly. If you put a young child, a toddler, beside a swimming pool, the chances are it will fall in, because it doesn't know, it doesn't fear water, but it will come to the top and breathe. So we have this, the first part, we've got three major parts of our brain. The first part is the base of the skull, keeps us alive, survival. And so that's the sort of the way. So we can unlearn things. And how do we do that? I teach a lot of breathing techniques. The benefit of a sigh. And when you sigh, you cannot think of anything else immediately after. And the science around that is that we've got nodes inside our lungs that grab hold of the oxygen when we breathe in. They collapse, or they get full of carbon dioxide. There's both happens. So by taking a big deep breath and really sighing, so we're teaching people to do that before every call. It just clears the head, and you go right, centered, and off you go again. And it's working. Yeah.
Well, I guess the other side of it is, not just the employees these days, worrying about your own staff, but now they're taking phone calls from anxious customers, aren't they? That's the other side of the coin. It's like you train your own staff and you look after your own staff, but now they're dealing with people who are phoning them up and saying, look, I've had enough and I'm frustrated.
I can't take it anymore.
Everything sucks. Yeah, can't take it anymore. So that's the other side of, I think, training that it's not just training the managers and the leaders on how looking after their own staff, but then training their staff how to cope with what is out there now. And unless you're in a profession where you're trained specifically like you were, or you're working in other sectors, who knows what the next call is going to be like. So how do you condition people to deal with those, hey, I've had enough of this, you guys suck, the world sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's probably two parts. So we have two different Well, they're the same, but so one, we call them vulnerable customers, and so it might be that they might have domestic violence in their life. They might have they've got the same things going on that we've got going on. There's a whole lot of things that are happening at the moment for people. So now, when they tell you something, and it might just be, this stuff is just overwhelming, it's overpowering, and the way to do it is to acknowledge it, right? So an emotion that is expressed is disarmed. So I've told you how I feel. Now, if you acknowledge it, it's even more disarmed. And you come back by saying something as simple as, you've been through a lot. These things are challenging, aren't they? So using the word like challenging. Now, there's some great research come out of a contact centre. In fact, it was a text centre, a crisis centre in the UK. 75 million text messages were analysed. Now, you can't beat that data. I don't know. I've never seen that data ever analysed so much before. The words that were slightly softened worked. Words that were, I'm sorry, I have to, that started with sentences that started with an explanation or an apology. I'm sorry, I have to ask you this. No, you're not sorry. Just ask the question, right? So, but we soften it. Now, for people who express, I can't take this anymore. Now, what we do is, and so there's a process, and I'm happy to send it to you, and you can send it and put it up on your site, etc. So it's a recognised way of dealing with those things, to hold people to account, to make sure that you've heard correctly. So the very first thing, when somebody says something and you're not sure, did I hear that right, or do they mean that they want to commit suicide? So what you do is you go, I'm sorry, I missed that, and you get them to repeat it. Now, the reason we get people to repeat what they've said is, who here has never said anything in the heat of the moment that they've later regretted? And so we get them to, I'm sorry, I missed that. What was it? What did you say? And they say, what, didn't you hear me? I can't take this anymore. I've had enough. Then you take yourself out of the seat and you put the organisation at whatever company you work with or work for. We take those comments very seriously. Are you serious about what you've just said? And they may say, no, I'm not. Now, regardless of what they say, if they say, no, I'm not, it doesn't matter. You still report it to a supervisor, but then you go through and you end the call, right? And you still report it. And the supervisor takes over and maybe gives them a call. And if there's any fear, everywhere around the world, we've got these emergency, over here it's 1737, it's Lifeline, but police are your go-to as well, because it's the same process around the world. If you've got an immediate fear for somebody, it's call your emergency services, and they have trained negotiators like I was. So I was the lead negotiator in New Zealand Police, trained people in suicide intervention. So if they've gone and said, yes, that's exactly right, we've taken ourselves out, and we go through the process, we then ask them, is there someone there with you? Yes. Can you hand the phone over to them, please? And they will. Okay. Because if they are truly suicidal, they want help because they've expressed it. And so you talk to the person, are you happy to leave them with it? Now, if they say no, you say, I'm going to get you some help. And you either call your crisis centre while the person's still on the phone, you keep them talking, call the crisis centre, or if I recommend the police, because all the people that work in the police call centre, emergency call centres, are trained. And so they will handshake the call off you. They've got the method to do that, and you leave it with them. Or they may say, please hang up, we're going to call them. And if they can't get hold of that person, they'll send a patrol car immediately. That's how it's dealt with, right? So it's not our role to save people's lives, because the impact on you, let me tell you, is substantial. So I was working hard, doing all sorts of things, and just started doing crisis intervention when I had depression and was suicidal. There's the media over here ran a documentary on me. It was 60 minutes of one of those shows. And it's up on our YouTube channel about the lead negotiator who was suicidal while doing suicide intervention. It was kind of scary. And so go and have a look at that, and it'll give you some idea of my background as well. But we've got another video up there. If you've got a loved one, it's called Looking After Loved Ones. It's free. It's 20 minutes long. If you've got a loved one who might be in that situation, have a look at it, and there's some helpful tips there. But coming back to the contact centre, it is there. That's the way to do it. It is a recognised process. it's been through law firms, it's been through, it's been peer reviewed, and it is the way to deal with it. Then when the call is over, the agent must go and seek help from a supervisor. You must debrief that call. Don't play the call again if it's been dealt with badly, right? So we just talk with them. Could you have done something differently? So we start off, what did you do well? What are the positives? Always start with, what did you learn? What were the positives? What did you do? Then what might you do differently next time if it wasn't such a good call? If it was such a good call and they want to hear it, replay it and just debrief it. So yeah, no, you did well, and just, I like the way. Don't say in those instances you could change, because it's about the process you go through. So we have it on the call center, contact centers. We have the little drop down boxes. Excuse me. So you put that process up there, and you focus on the process, not the words. That's the other thing. When you're dealing with somebody who's suicidal, don't focus on the emotions. So what do I have to do? What did Lance say? Ask these questions. How did they get there? Right? How can I fix it? Right? So that's what you do.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So the other side of where we are today is, as economies, businesses start opening back up again, we now have people like you said as well, who might fear going back into the work environment because they're used to being at home. They feel safe, secure. They've got everything around them. How do leaders, assuming the work environment is safe, how do leaders actually start to encourage people to come back in if they're resistant? And to what extent does a leader say, look, it's just not working with this person anymore? Because that would be a terrible situation if the person doesn't want to come back because they're scared. And we're seeing it in the States actually right now. If you look at the news in the States, you've got teachers who don't want to go back to schools because they feel they're unsafe, because they're being forced back in to interact with students who might have COVID-19. Your situation is a little bit different there in New Zealand, but in different parts of the world, how do leaders cope with staff who just feel unsafe and say, look, I don't want to come back just yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, things are different back here, but no one wants to go back to work. 2/3 of people haven't gone back to work. 2/3. A third for the contact centers, so they had to go back, still haven't gone back, but 2/3 for most other organisations haven't gone back to work. And some people have actually taken redundancy.
Really? Is that because of fear, that people just don't want to go out?
It's fear. So what drives us and what keeps us alive is fear, right? So, and I've covered this off extensively in my next book around the main driver is fear. So worry is driven by fear. So survival is fear. Now we do fear. So the first thing I'll say is please don't push people.
Yeah.
If you force people, they rebel. All right. So the same as if you look at that video on looking after loved ones, don't push your loved ones to go to a doctor. No. Encourage them. I'll come with you. Just small little touch points. So ask them about themselves, so we don't guess what's going on, because it might be a whole multitude of things that's going on in their life right now. And so it might be that, and so what we do is, it's virtually the same way of getting someone out. So if I'm talking to somebody that's on the other side, wrong side of a handrail on the bridge, I'll get them to put the leg over and just there, or maybe just to turn around and face me and hold on with both hands. And so we're just going to do little parts, right, to get them back. Why don't you come in for a coffee? And once they get in there and see other people, and don't, they don't have to touch people, but just people walking past and going, hi, how you doing? Good to see you back. Just little steps. It's like desensitization, isn't it? It's like people who can't fly, right? So it's that they got a fear of flying. So we take them to the airport and they just sit and watch planes going up and down, up and down. It's just slowly bring them back. If you push people, they rebel. Each of us, we are the same but different, is what I do it. So the hardwiring of our brain, the fears and all that, they're pretty much similar. There's some cultural differences, of course. But for the majority of it's what we've learned in our life. So we can unlearn fear, but it takes 3 times as long to unlearn fear as it is to learn. So that's the key here. It's 3 times. It's the same way as if we have a negative thing happen, we've got to have 3 positive things to counteract it. That's the way it's called a negativity bias. And to overcome that, it takes 3 times. And so just having those little touch points, ask them. So this happens, we teach cops how to become a crisis negotiator, and the cops are question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. No. And so how do you know? So we look for the hook when people are struggling, what's keeping you going? What's one good thing? Which is what managers could do. What one thing did you enjoy while you were here? I'll bet you it's interaction with others. Why don't you come and have an hour in the office and interact with others, and then you can go home again? So that's how you can do it. But looking for that hook, and I'd say to them in the audience, so how do you find out the hook? Oh, well, it's always sport. No, it's not. And no one ever comes up to that. Why don't you ask them? And so ask them, why don't you want to come back in the office? And don't say, oh, it's all safe here. No, it's not for the person, right? For them, it's real. So, okay, well, what would make it simpler for you? Easier for you, because we do want you back here because we love having you here in the office. Soften your words and then just say, well, actually, to get me back there, I don't know if I want to come back. Okay. But why don't we meet for a coffee downstairs or in the cafe two doors down? Sure. And then walk past the office and take them into the foyer of the office and say, well, what about this? And chances are people will be walking past and say hello. And that's how you do it. And maybe once for one day and then leave it a couple of days and then come back. They will come back, and all of a sudden you'll see them turn up and they'll be away again. When we're stuck at home, when we're in our bubble, we feel safe and secure. The very first thing we go for is the basics of life for the next level of Maslow, which is safety and security.
Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting, even just listening to the words that you're using, you're using lots of open questions, how, why, who, what, where, when. You're talking about little steps, not trying to force somebody. Lots of really good pointers here. And one of the things I've noticed actually, Lance, is because we're doing a lot more video these days, everybody's actually going into everyone else's households. You're seeing things about them. You're talking about sports. I have conversations with people these days, and if I'm in my home office, I'm in my little studio in my basement today, but if I'm in my home office, people say, what's that behind you? What's that? So you start noticing things, and it starts building. I'm finding in many ways, because we're forced to do things by video these days, we're actually learning a lot more about our own staff and learning what's going on in their mind. I have people, I do a video call with, and I see different things in their environment changing from day to day, and it gives you something to talk about, or what's that over there? So I think you've hit on a lot of really good points about the questioning skills, the steps to take, little steps, not forcing people, and also trying to focus on things that may be a little bit more, of interest to them. As you say, it's not always sport, it could be something completely different. So this is really, really interesting stuff. I know you and I could talk for probably hours, and you're like an encyclopedia with this stuff. So, I would love to spend more time with you guys and get more information as time goes on and dip in and out of different things. I think you have so much to give the industry, and not just the contact center industry, but anybody who's runs a business these days. So what I'd like to suggest is, I want to welcome you back anytime to come and join us. This has been really, really good. And you must tell us when your book's coming out, because I'd love to get a copy of that as well. And
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, look,
it sounds good.
I've enjoyed it, right? I love doing this stuff, and I do lots of free community events, and I know I bang on about it, but I just want to show people that we're the same but different. Yeah,
definitely.
We're the same but different, right? So we have the same hard wiring, we have that same basic survival, but each of us. So even twin studies have been dismissed now because identical twins are different, even when they've been separated at birth. And the studies that are coming out now are saying we are individuals. I used to do this 5 generations, how they communicate differently. I don't do that anymore because it's just generalizations. And so every single one of us has an obligation to look after ourselves and then to look after others, to be selfish, to be selfless. So can I encourage those that are watching this that look after yourself, do that one thing for yourself, center yourself, get the sleep tips document, whatever you've got to do go back to work. The way to adapt to adversity is through breathing, and there's yoga and all that sort of stuff, but our stuff is a bit different. It's based on actual science, which yoga is, by the way. Hope that didn't come out wrong. But also do one thing a day that takes you out of your comfort zone. And that's how we learn to adapt. We've got words over here like pivot. You've got to learn to pivot. You've got to learn to, swivel and just ridiculous words. No, you don't. You just need to learn to adapt. And the way to do that is one thing that makes you slightly uncomfortable. Our brain likes to be challenged, right? It doesn't like ruts. It doesn't like routines. It likes rituals. There's a difference, and the difference is mindset. And so doing one thing, even if it's just to get out of bed, even if it's just to go to the letterbox, just do one thing a day that steps outside your comfort zone. Even if it's to get out of bed and eat a can of soup and go back to bed. You're a legend to me. You're a hero. And that's how we do it.
Excellent. Lance, you're a fountain of knowledge, my friend. It's been awesome talking to you. Thank you. I wish you a great day, and thank you again for your time. And come back and talk to us anytime, my friend.
You bet. Thanks so much, Raj. I appreciate the opportunity, and all the best to everyone.
Thank you. You're welcome.